Part 52. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 549. ID Con 1697417. Looking at the huge courtyard full of fighting flames, Eugenie also stopped in her tracks. She knew very well that it was useless for her to go there now. "Father, why is this happening?" Eugenie said with tears on her face. In fact, Eugenie knew long ago that her father, Grandet, had formed countless hatreds because of his greed for money and power. A powerful resistance force like the Saruyama United Army also emerged. A scene like today will happen sooner or later. The housekeeper Xiaowen hurriedly helped Eugenie. "Miss, please don't be like this. If you really don't want to leave, then we will wait here together. I believe that with the strength of the security forces, Master Grandet will be safe," the middle-aged butler said. Eugenie looked at housekeeper Charles, nodded and said, "Okay." Eugenie, Steward Charles, and these attendants were waiting here at the gate outside the huge courtyard. The battle in the huge courtyard is still in full swing. Roger and Luffy caused a violent fire because the Fourth Army used field artillery to fire incendiary shells. Roger and Luffy hurried to the back. Dodge the incendiary shells fired by the vigilante field army. Although the explosive power of these incendiary shells is not great, they contain a large amount of chemical powder, which will burn violently after the explosion. In addition to the great damage caused by burning, the flame will consume a lot of oxygen and easily cause suffocation. These incendiary shells are more than 10 times more harmful than ordinary shells. "These weapons are really a headache," Rog said. "However, these field guns cannot be allowed to continue firing incendiary shells." Rog was going to take the initiative to destroy the dozen or so field guns. The dozen or so field guns were lining up at this moment, and the artillery manning them quickly reloaded new shells and took aim. Rog needs to kill these enemies manipulating field artillery as soon as possible. Rog swung the iron birch sword to avoid the burning areas, and quickly rushed to the field artillery. When Rog was less than 100 meters away from the field artillery, the commander of the Colas Corps also discovered Rog's intention. The cavalryman rushed to stop him. The commander of the Coras Legion gave the order. "Obey." More than cavalrymen near the commander of the Colas army rushed towards Rog with powerful horses. The cavalrymen rushed towards Rog with sabers or rifles in hand. The mobility of the cavalry is still very high. They quickly rushed to the sides and front of Rog, and surrounded Rog. "To move forward, we need to kill these troublesome guys," Rog said. "Kill him." The cavalry rode their strong horses and rushed towards Rog. The first 4 cavalry swung their sabers at Rog. Rog swung the iron birch sword and slashed at the hoof of the horse under the first cavalryman who rushed forward. Puff! The sharp iron birch sword cut off the horse's right front hoof. Half of the horse's hoof rolled to the ground, blood flying everywhere. Hiss! The horse whose hoof was cut off also quickly fell to the ground due to inertia. The cavalryman was thrown to the ground. Another cavalryman charged forward on horseback. This time, his saber had already slashed at Rog's head. Chong! The opponent's saber scratched the walnut armor on Rog's head, making a harsh sound and sparks flying everywhere. There was another scratch on the walnut armor on Rog's body, but it was still extremely strong. Rog slashed at the left hind leg of the horse under the cavalryman with the great iron birch sword. Puff! The horse's left hind leg was amputated. The cavalryman fell to the ground along with the horse beneath him. The remaining 2 cavalry shot at Rog with rifles in hand. Bang bang! A bullet from the rifle struck Roger in the body. There were bursts of sparks and slight cracks. However, these 2 cavalrymen had seen Rog's power in close combat. No one dares to use their wealth or life to try the power of the iron birch sword. They just fight with rifles at a distance. One of the 2 cavalrymen whose horse legs were cut off by Rog fell to death, and the other stood up again. Rog saw this enemy, and swung the iron birch sword to chop off the opponent's head. the cavalryman's head and part of his neck were cut off, and blood spurted everywhere. The body also fell limp to the ground. More than 30 cavalrymen began to attack Rog one after another. They also saw the powerful fighting power of Rog holding the great iron birch sword. These vigilante cavalry only shoot long range with rifles, or use long-handled fuse grenades to attack. ZZ. A trooper unplugged a long-handled fuse grenade. The long-handled fuse grenade emits sparks and white smoke. The cavalryman threw it violently, and the long-handled fuse grenade fell beside Rog. Boom! This long-handled fuse grenade exploded violently. The other cavalry also took out the long-handled fuse grenades they carried one after another, and they pulled the fuse apart. Zzz. The long-handled fuse grenades were thrown towards Rog by the cavalry in groups. Accompanied by more than a dozen long-handled fuse grenades fell to Rog's feet. Boom 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 boom. Rog was enveloped by continuous explosions. The surrounding cavalry used rifles and long-handled fuse grenades alternately, combined with the maneuvering of the cavalry to suppress Rog. Rog first inserted the iron birch sword into the ground, then knelt down and pressed his right hand to the ground. Don't forget, my ability is to control plants. The power of the plant fruit was concentrated in Rog's body and transmitted to his right arm and right hand. Although Rog's right hand was covered by walnut armor, it still shone with green light. Plant fruit power is transmitted into the earth below. The huge courtyard of the Grandette mansion is filled with plants. There are all kinds of flowers and trees, but for Roger, the plants here are all weapons. And places with plants are where Rog can really show his talents. This is not the big desert of Alabasta. Grassrope. Roger said. Suddenly, in a circular area of 40 meters in diameter, the weeds on the ground began to grow rapidly. The weed, which was originally more than 10 centimeters high, quickly grew to a height of more than 1 meter, and its volume and toughness also increased significantly. Not only that, these gigantic and tough weeds also entangled the legs of the horses of the cavalrymen who were moving violently. This is how the same thing. The weeds have actually grown up. Unbelievable. But it's not just as simple as the horses' legs being entangled, these giant weeds are very tough enough to cut the horses' legs. Hiss. Horses fell quickly with cuts and entangled legs. After the cavalry fell to the ground, they were also entangled in weeds and cut their bodies. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 550. ID Con 1697418. It hurts. The cavalry who were injured by the fall were struggling painfully, but the weeds were tightly entangled and cut their bodies. Some cavalrymen even had their necks cut and died directly. More than 30 cavalrymen were either dead or injured, and Rog stood up from the ground again. The commander of the Korra's army and the officers and soldiers who were observing the battle not far away were terrified after seeing this scene. The head of the Korra's legion looked at Rog and said, "How could he have such terrifying power? Rog's move is enough to make the cavalry units that are now supporting them unable to fight. Even the infantry couldn't get too close." Rog didn't stop. He pulled the iron birch sword off the ground and rushed towards the field artillery. The field artillery also saw Rog defeating the cavalry. Their faces were full of surprise and fear. Rog rushed over quickly wielding the great iron birch sword. These artillerymen did not dare to escape at all, because Kola's military management was very strict, and they would definitely die if they escaped. Some artillerymen drew their pistols and started firing at Roger. Bang bang bang. The bullets shot at Rog, but after hitting the walnut armor on Rog, they all sputtered sparks. Of course, these cannot effectively damage Rog's walnut armor. Rog rushed to a field gun and killed the 2 gunners with his iron birch sword. Then Rog looked at a box of shells beside the field gun. Not only this box of shells, but Rog looked at the other field guns with a box of shells placed beside them. Even just detonating one of the boxes of shells can form a chain explosion. Roger picked up two long-handled fuse grenades from a dead gunner, and Roger pulled their fuses apart. Zzz. Two long-handled fuse grenades emitted sparks and white smoke. Some other artillerymen looked at Roger, and they quickly had bad thoughts. "What are you doing?" asked an artilleryman with fear on his face. Rog said calmly, "I just want to set off some fireworks." Rog threw two long-handled fuse grenades at the shell box. Afterwards, Rog also hurriedly left here. After all, the explosion power of the shells together is still very powerful. Both Rog and the artillerymen left the row of field artillery. The two long-handled fuse grenades eventually exploded. Boom, 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 boom. Boxes and boxes of shells were detonated, covering the field artillery like a string of explosions. These shells are also mainly burning shells, quickly producing shocking flames that swallow everything around them. Crowds of flames surged in the huge courtyard, and some security forces were also affected. The scope of the flames generated by the series of explosions greatly exceeded the expectations of everyone, including Rog and the commander of the Korra's army. Luffy was surprised when he saw this huge flame and said, "What a powerful flame." Seeing the bad situation just now, the head of the Korra's army hurriedly steered the horses to avoid them with the adjutant beside him. After the explosion, he still accelerated and ran wildly. But some security forces without horses will be miserable. Although some distance had been opened, many people were still killed by the huge flames. Rog was also covered in huge flames. At this time, Rog quickly lay down on the ground, held his breath, and tried to survive the flames. Eugenie and Butler Charles, who were at the entrance of the huge courtyard, also saw the amazing flames in the huge courtyard. "Such a huge flame!" Eugenie said in shock. Although Eugenie's personality is a little bold, like a boy, but she had never seen such a fierce battle and killing before. The horrors of war were officially before her eyes. The flames in the huge courtyard billowed and burned, but then disappeared again. The incredible flames covered almost a quarter of the yard. However, since the flames are mainly burned by specially made chemical powders, once the chemical powders are burned out, they just continue to burn on the flowers, plants, and trees in the huge yard. After the huge flame passed, there were still many trees that continued to burn, and the flowers and plants covered by the flame were quickly burned. The commander of the Korra's army was able to escape, but he and his lieutenants were still immersed in fear. "It's like a flame in hell," the head of the Korra's army said in fear. He, who had always been calm and cold-hearted, felt infinite fear in his heart even when he witnessed the flames caused by this terrifying explosion. The flames from this series of explosions burned almost security forces to death. The dozen or so field artillery brought in were also destroyed. The number of troops supported by the Fourth Army was more than 1,000, and they received more than 100 broken troops under Colonel Goldenbeard, and the number was temporarily close to 1,200. There are now less than troops left in the Fourth Army. The commander of the Korra's army now still needs to use less than troops to continue to think of ways to complete the battle. Eugenie and housekeeper Charles at the gate of the huge courtyard saw this terrifying scene. "It's really like hell," Eugenie said with a shocked expression. The reason for such a fierce battle was all because of the battle around Grandet. People in high positions can make many people give their lives because of some actions. Especially after Eugenie saw the burnt corpses in the huge yard, her eyes couldn't help but shed tears. Eugenie crouched down, covering her eyes, and began to weep. The kind girl was very saddened that so many people had died fighting. Because these could have been avoided in the first place. In the huge courtyard, there were charred corpses all over the place, and a few survivors were walking around in pain while their bodies were on fire. Some of them were burned to death in the end, while others committed suicide with their own guns and sabers. Luffy just ran away when he saw that the situation was not good. It escapes to a distance by virtue of the stretching ability of the rubber. Now Luffy looked at the area that was ravaged by flames. It's really tragic. Well, where's Rog? Luffy suddenly found that Rog was not found. He rushed quickly to the scorched land, looking for Rog. On the scorched land, Rog was prostrate on the ground wearing a walnut armor. Although the armor on his back was not destroyed, it became scorched black and radiated heat. The flames were so powerful just now that the walnut armor on Rog's body was burned violently. Well. Roger moved, and he barely got up. Fortunately, the flames that were raging just now ended soon, otherwise Rog would definitely die. Roger, are you here? Luffy rushed over quickly. Roger raised his head and looked at Luffy. Finished. Roger looked around with lingering fear. There was a piece of scorched earth around, and there were many charred bodies of security forces. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 551. ID Con 1698298. These charred corpses exude a scorched smell. Some of the corpses are all charred black, and some are partially charred, but they all look extremely tragic. We still have a lot of enemies. Rog stood up and looked at the remaining security forces. Although the huge flames just killed more than security troops, there are still nearly security troops. However, the biggest result of the explosion just now was that in addition to directly killing more than enemies, it also had a great deterrent effect on the remaining enemies. Rogue and Luffy looked at the remaining enemies, preparing to continue fighting. Okay, we still have a lot of enemies, Rogue said. Kick them away, Luffy said even more energetically. The two continued to fight hard against Korra's and the remaining vigilante forces under his command. At the time when there was such a fierce battle near the Grandet Mansion. In the area outside the port of Magic Valley City. The huge offshore dock moved to the western coast of Gaia Island under the command of Mont Blanc Kulik. Magic Valley City is located in the western coastal area of Gaia Island. The huge marine dock slowly sailed to the west of the Demon Valley City port. On the top deck of this behemoth, Mont Blanc Kulik, the ape, and the orangutan, as well as Sauron and the king of ninjas, Nami, and Usopp, Chopper and the goddess of spring water are all standing on it. A large number of crew members are also standing here. Now it is possible to see the appearance of Gaia Island and Magic Valley City quite clearly. Finally, we have arrived at our destination, Mont Blanc Kulik said, looking at the port of Magic Valley City in the distance. Rog and Sanji are fighting in the city, Usopp said, looking at Magic Valley City. They seem to have built a lot of fortifications, Sauron said. Others also looked over and saw that there were many fortifications built in the port area of Magic Valley City and the nearby coastline. It seems that they want to welcome us well, said the orangutan. Let them taste the power of our super artillery later, said the orangutan. In the command room of the sea dock, the crew members responsible for manipulating and commanding this huge sea monster kept giving orders. The sea dock continued to drive towards the port of Magic Valley City. The crew in the 4 super turrets in the offshore dock are also highly prepared. Those triple-mounted super cannons will fire deadly heavy shells at any time. There are also patrol boats and supply ships of the security forces patrolling near the port of Magic Valley City, and they have also discovered the approaching sea dock. After all, this behemoth is too conspicuous, and it is still daytime. The alarm sounded loudly at the port of Magic Valley City. The marine dockyard is here, the Saruyama Alliance army is here, and there is an emergency alert. At this time, General Du Lun, the commander-in-chief of the security forces, was in command of the battle at the port area of Magic Valley City. He watched the scene with senior officers behind the fortification groups in the port area. "They're finally here," General Du Lun said with a heavy tone. The reason why he ordered the security forces to build a large number of coastal fortifications here was because he thought that the Ape Mountain United Army might attack. Now the Ape Mountain Allied forces really came here by driving the sea dock. Okay, now order the rest of the 1st Army and the 4th Army stationed at the port and coastal fortifications to bombard the enemy with forts first. At the same time, the main part hides in the tunnel to reduce casualties. General Dulun issued an order. Yes, said a communications officer. He immediately used a telephone bug to convey orders to the remainder of the 1st Army and the 4th Army in the fortification group. The 4th Army originally annexed the remnants of the previously destroyed 3rd Army, with more than people. More than 500 of them were sent to guard the Grandet Mansion. Just now, the commander of the Cola's army rushed to the Grandet Mansion and took away more than 1,000 people. There are now remaining members of the 4th Army defending the fortification group. However, the 1st Army, which has the most powerful heavy firepower among the security forces, is guarding the fortification group. The head of Ludwig's army personally led 2,000 elite officers and soldiers to guard here. The 1st Army was originally a heavily armed force for attacking the city. Equipped with a large number of heavy artillery and many heavy weapons. Although it was a defensive operation, the 1st Army just placed a large number of heavy weapons originally used for attacking fortifications in the fort. The heavy artillery in these forts is no less powerful than those on heavy warships, and some are even stronger. As for some other smaller bunkers except forts, they are mainly equipped with machine guns, mortars, and field guns. There are more than security forces defending the port area of Magic Valley City and the fortifications on the nearby coastline. Inside a battery in the port area, a middle-aged man with blonde curly hair used a telescope to observe the approaching dock on the sea. "It's really a giant," the middle-aged man said. An officer on the side said, "Commander Ludwig, the enemy's sea dock is constantly approaching. General Duran has instructed us to reduce casualties." Commander Ludwig took down the binoculars and said, "Since the enemy is here, we must make it impossible for them to approach here. Order the battery to aim at the target and prepare to fire." "As ordered," the officer said. The order was quickly conveyed. The forts in the port area of Magic Valley City and the nearby coastline are quickly preparing for battle. Inside the fort, the soldiers of the 1st Legion loaded heavy shells with a diameter of 1 meter into the heavy artillery. The heavy artillery were aimed at the approaching sea dock. As long as there is an order from the phone bug, the heavy artillery will fire. The commander of Ludwig's army in the port continued to observe the approach of the sea dock. As the sea dock kept approaching, he also listened to the report of the officer on the side. "Report to Commander Ludwig, all our forts are ready," the officer reported. Commander Ludwig said to him, "Bring the phone bug." The officer respectfully handed him the phone bug. Commander Ludwig took the phone bug, and he glanced at the 2 heavy-duty assault artillery pieces with a diameter of 1 meter and a length of 8 meters in the fort where he was. "Hello, I am Commander Ludwig. All troops are now targeting the sea dock. Open fire." Commander Ludwig gave the order. The phone bug's order was spread throughout all the battery cells. The troops in these forts belong to the 1st Army. Because the 1st Army has extremely powerful heavy artillery. Boom boom boom. The 2 heavy assault artillery in the fort where the commander of Ludwig's army was located took the lead in shelling. The other forts also opened fire. Boom 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 boom. The heavy assault artillery fired violently. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 552. ID Con 1698299. On the top deck of the sea dock, Usopp and the others saw the flashing lights of the forts in the port area and the nearby coastline. Then the roaring cannon that shook the world rang out. Swarms of heavy artillery shells shot over. "Oh my God!" Usopp was so frightened that he trembled all over and quickly hid behind Zoro. "It seems we are really unpopular," Zoro complained as he looked at the incoming cannonballs. The heavy artillery shells finally hit the offshore dock after flying. Boom! The huge hull of the offshore dock was hit. Boom, 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 boom. Heavy artillery shells kept hitting the huge body of the sea dock. Although the offshore dock is huge and has a shell made of solid steel and high-quality wood, Mont Blanc Kulik and the others standing on the top deck can still feel the violent tremors under their feet. Some heavy artillery shells flew above the top deck and smashed into the vast top deck. Boom! The heavy artillery shell hit the top deck, and even the hard top deck was smashed and dented. Boom, 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 boom. More and more heavy shells hit the top deck. It's also rapidly becoming unsafe here. A heavy artillery shell with a diameter of 1 meter flew towards Sauron and Usopp. Wow, the shells fell down. Usopp was so frightened that he lay on the deck, trying to stick his head into the deck like an ostrich. One sword style. Crow. Demon hunt. Sauron jumped up quickly, and slashed a powerful blow when the heavy artillery shell was only more than 10 meters away from the deck. The blow split the heavy shell in two, and the force of the beheading knocked the two halves aside. Boom, rumble, rumble. The two halves of the shells fell on the deck and exploded violently. Zoro also landed on the deck. Ah, I'm not dead. Usopp stood up again, and he looked at Zoro. Zoran, you are amazing. With you, no shells can hit us, Usopp said with admiration. Zoro did not react at all to the praise. He was still very vigilant about every falling heavy artillery shell. These heavy artillery shells are really powerful, Zoro said calmly. At this moment, another heavy shell hit Nami and the Ninja King. Oh help, Nami hugged herself into a ball and cried out in fear. Phantom knife technique. Thrust. The king of ninja jumped up, waved his ninja sword at the center of the heavy shell and stabbed it. This thorn is extremely powerful, piercing the middle of the heavy artillery shell. Then the heavy artillery shell exploded in mid-air. However, the impact range of the explosion was still very large, and the king of ninja who jumped up was also affected, and he fell down quickly. However, with that kind of agility, the king of ninja successfully landed on the deck. Nami looked up and found that she was saved. She looked at the Ninja King and said, "Fortunately, I have you." At this time, another heavy artillery shell flew over. But Nami's face turned pale when she saw it. This heavy shell flew at a much lower angle, and whether the King of Ninja can successfully intercept it is also a question. Be careful, the Ninja King quickly rushed to Nami's side, picked her up and took her away. The heavy artillery shell landed where Nami was just now. Boom! There was a violent explosion on this deck, and flames and smoke were scattered. The Ninja King finally stopped after taking Nami to a safe place. He put Nami down. The two of them looked at where they were just now. I saw a big sunken crater blown out on the deck there. There are also cracks from the inside and outside around. It's really scary, Nami said with a sigh. If you can't block it, dodging is also a good way, said the Ninja King. A heavy cannonball hit Chopper and the Fountain Goddess. Seeing the rapidly approaching heavy artillery shell, Chopper was so frightened that his eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. It's about to be smashed down, Chopper said. At this time, the goddess of springs raised her golden axe and whispered an ancient magic spell. Sparks were generated around the golden axe, and then flames burned, and finally turned into a fire phoenix that could be written on it. Go Fire Phoenix! The goddess of springs manipulated the fire phoenix to fly towards the incoming heavy shells. The fire phoenix has a piercing cry, which is both like the song of a bird and the sound of a violent flame burning and trembling. The fire phoenix finally hit the heavy artillery shell. Boom! There was a violent explosion in midair. The heavy artillery shells turned into explosive flames together with the fire phoenix. Even in the daytime, the light of the explosion flame is still dazzling. Chopper lay on the deck, his face full of tears and runny nose, and said, "I'm saved." The goddess of spring looked at him and said softly and calmly, "Okay, It's too dangerous here. Hurry up and get to the back. Okay, okay. After listening to the warm voice of the spring goddess, Chopper quickly left and retreated to a position farther back on the deck. But others are just not as good. Many of the crew on the top deck were killed by the heavy shells that fell down. Even Mont Blanc Kulik, the apes and orangutans couldn't block these heavy shells. Although they are the big three of the Ape Mountain United Army, they are powerful. But they are all good at melee combat. Lack of long-range countermeasures against these heavy shells. Even if he used brute force to block it, he would either die or be injured. The core purpose of this battle is to contain the large forces of the security forces. How can you fight if you are injured? It's really scary, the ape said as he retreated. Boss, retreat quickly. The further forward you are, the easier it is to be hit by these heavy artillery shells, the orangutan said as he retreated. Mont Blanc Kulik hurriedly ran towards the back area of the top deck with the ape and orangutan. The enemy's firepower is far beyond our imagination, Mont Blanc Kulik said seriously. He turned his gaze to the super turret in the offshore dock. Our hope of victory depends entirely on you. Mont Blanc Kulik took out the phone bug again. The two super turrets at the front of the offshore dock were also hit by some heavy artillery shells. However, these two heavy-duty turrets are made of a large amount of steel and high-quality wood, and their strength is stronger than the shell of the offshore dock. The heavy shells had caused some cracks and wounds, and exacerbated the cracks left from the last battle with the vigilante fleet. But these two super forts are still basically intact. The three huge super cannons were still aimed at the front. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 553. ID Con 1698870. With these super artillery, no matter how powerful the enemy is, it is just a cloud. Attention super fort, prepare to fight back against the enemy. Mont Blanc Kulik gave the order to the phone bug. The current left and right super turrets of the sea dock can attack the fortifications of the security forces at the port of Magic Valley City and the coastline. The right front super turret received the order. The left front super turret received the order. Soon the two super turrets responded. Mont Blanc Kulik and the others continued to retreat to the rear area of the top deck. The rest of the battle will be handed over to the two super turrets in front of the sea dock. Inside the super turret on the right front. In the firepower room on the top floor, after deciding on the bombing target, the commander used the phone bug to issue orders to the power room at the bottom and the ammunition room in the middle. Power room, aim the turret at 1 o'clock. Ammunition room, use heavy high explosive shells. The super fort has 3 floors. The bottom floor is the power room responsible for the steering of the entire fort. In the middle is the ammunition room for storing ammunition. At the top is the fire room for command and aiming. In the power room at the top of the super turret, the crew works together to steer this huge mechanical reel. The huge mechanical shaft turned towards 1 o'clock amidst the sound of mechanical friction. The super turret can only be aimed when it rotates, and the power room plays an extremely important role. Outside, the super fort began to rotate in the 1 o'clock direction. The 3 super cannons, 20 meters long and 2 meters in diameter, were aimed at the security military fortifications on the coastline. Inside the ammunition room in the middle of the super turret, the crews here are well trained to transport heavy high explosive shells. A heavy high explosive artillery shell with a diameter of 2 meters was hoisted by the crane tower, and then began to be transported to the fire room above. The first one has been delivered, hurry up for the second one, and prepare for the third one. 3 heavy high explosive shells with a diameter of 2 meters were successively sent to the fire room above through the lifting tower. In the fire room on the top floor, the crew opened the breech covers of the 3 super cannons. 3 heavy high explosive shells were loaded into the rear breech loading points of the 3 super cannons. The super artillery is fully loaded, Gunner Huey reported. The commander gave another order, the 3 super cannons are tilted upward at degrees together. The gunner quickly used the super cannon's own rotating machine to adjust the tilt. In order for the 3 super cannons of the super turret to hit the target, it is necessary to adjust the direction of the entire super turret and the inclination of the 3 super cannons. The inclination of the super artillery has reached an upward tilt of degrees, Gunner Hui reported. The commander looked at the fortifications on the distant coastline and gave an order. Super cannon, fire. The triple super artillery on the super fort opened fire at the same time. Boom 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 boom. 3 loud bangs sounded almost at the same time, and the huge 2-meter diameter muzzle of the super artillery shot out amazing flames. Whether it was Usopp or the others on the top deck or the security forces at the port and coastline of Demon Valley City, they all saw this earth-shattering scene clearly. Especially on the side of the security forces, many people saw the super artillery salvo for the first time. 3 heavy high-explosive artillery shells with a diameter of 2 meters flew towards the fortifications on the coastline at an alarming speed. Or more directly, a reinforced concrete fort. The security forces built a large number of fortifications at the port of Magic Valley City and the nearby coastline. Most of them are reinforced concrete fortifications. And reinforced concrete fortifications are also divided into size and firmness. Among them, the reinforced concrete fort is considered the strongest fortification, and it is also equipped with powerful heavy artillery. The officers and soldiers of the security forces in this reinforced concrete fort could only see 3 astonishingly huge shells flying towards them in less than a few seconds. 3 heavy high-explosive shells hit the reinforced concrete fort. The huge explosive force and impact shattered the structure of the reinforced concrete fort, and this sturdy heavy fort began to collapse. The huge flames melted the reinforced concrete. The officers and soldiers inside were basically killed in the initial shock, and the flames completely burned them into coke. Boom rumble. The astonishingly violent explosion blew the reinforced concrete fort into a pile of huge fragments, flying towards the surrounding land, sea, and even the sky. 3 super artillery salvos destroyed a heavy reinforced concrete fort. The security forces defending the fortifications at the port and coastline of Magic Valley City were extremely frightened when they saw or even just heard the huge explosion. The security forces were so frightened that they were even too scared to speak. General Duran, who was watching the battle in the rear area of the fortification group, also felt alarming fear. Some of the senior officers around him were even frightened to the ground. "This is really a doomsday weapon," General Duran said with a twitching expression. General Dulun has also seen many fierce battle scenes. Before he was recruited into the public security army with a lot of money, he was an officer of a kingdom in the West Sea, and he was well tested on the battlefield in tragic wars with neighboring countries. But the shock produced by the super artillery salvo just now made him feel that everything seemed pale and small in front of the power of these terrifying artillery. At the port of Magic Valley City, in the fort where Commander Ludwig is located. Commander Ludwig also saw the shocking scene when 3 super artillery salvos were fired from the offshore dock. "How can there be such a weapon that shakes the world?" Commander Ludwig said in shock. This Legion commander, known for his harshness, was extremely terrified at this time. Some residents in the urban area of Magic Valley City also heard the terrifying sound of shelling. Some residents in the city of Magic Valley observed this shocking battle from the taller buildings. Even the tops of some buildings are full of people. Is this the security force fighting against the Sarasama United Army? What a horrific sight! Is that gunfire really made by weapons made by humans? The thunder in the sky is not as shocking as those cannons. Has this war reached its climax? Could it be that the security forces and the Saruyama allied forces are going to fight to the death? Residents in the city who observed this shocking battle were all talking. However, some residents were worried that the fighting would spread to the city, so they hurriedly hid, either hiding in the basement of their home, or fleeing deeper into the city. On the top deck of the sea dock, Mont Blanc Kulik observes the effects of the super battery bombardment. The shocking force was like the sky falling apart. but even this powerful weapon needs restraint. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 554. ID Con 1698871. Mont Blanc Kulik picked up the phone bug and issued new orders to the super turret. Attention to the super artillery, because the super artillery is powerful. So you need to avoid damaging the city. You must be precise when attacking. There was a quick response from the phone bug. The right front super turret received the order. The left front super turret received the order. The purpose of the Saruyama Allied forces is to overthrow the rule of Grandet. The principle is to resolutely not harm civilians. Therefore, the Ape Mountain Allied forces with Mont Blanc Kulik and the orangutans as the core will never harm civilians. This is also the reason why the Ape Mountain United Army can grow. In fact, General Du Lun on the side of the security forces also has his principles. The security forces can completely build the fortification groups closer to the urban area. However, most of the fortifications are still in the frontier, but they are extremely strong. There are really two reasons for this. One is that many of Grandet's industries are located in urban areas, so in order to avoid disaster, the fortifications had to be built in more advanced areas. But another reason is the quality of General Durham himself. Unlike other cold-blooded regiment commanders and high and low-ranking officers in the security forces, General Du Lun really implemented the principle that war should not affect civilians. For him it was a general's honor. It is also the principle that any soldier should abide by. When he fought for his own country against enemy countries in the West Sea in the past, he gave full preferential treatment to the prisoners and warned the soldiers not to harm civilians. But General Durham's own country was devastated by the war. General Durham was also forced to go into exile here on the Great Line. Finally joined the security forces of Magic Valley City. It is precisely because of the iron blood and integrity of the soldiers that General Du Lun was able to shoulder great responsibilities and become the mainstay after the disastrous defeat of the security forces. And the stingy and cunning Grandet also admired him very much. People with a certain integrity will be appreciated and loved everywhere. Whether it's a good person or a bad person. The super turret on the left front of the sea dock also fired huge shells at the same time. The super turret on the front left aimed at the fortifications at the port of Magic Valley City. The triple-mounted super artillery fired together. Boom 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 boom. 3 heavy high-explosive shells with a diameter of 2 meters were fired. These 3 heavy high-explosive shells flew towards a reinforced concrete fort at the port of Magic Valley City. Boom rumble. There was an earth-shaking sound, as well as smoke and flames rising into the sky. The reinforced concrete shells were blown into pieces and flew to the surroundings, the sea, and the sky. The 2 super turrets at the front of the sea dock continuously bombarded the port of Magic Valley City and the security military-industrial groups in the nearby coastline area. Although the interval between their attacks is very long, every salvo will deal a heavy blow to the security forces. Moreover, the psychological deterrent effect produced by the shocking power of the super artillery bombardment far exceeds the lethality of strength. In the face of this powerful force, only those reinforced concrete forts are still stubbornly resisting. The security forces in some other small fortifications were frightened and quickly hid in the tunnel below. Of course, the reinforced concrete turrets were still firing back. These heavy forts housed heavy assault artillery. The power of the shells fired by these 1-meter caliber heavy artillery is also very powerful. They add up to a lot, and they can also cause certain damage to the strong hull of the offshore dock. Commander Ludwig continued to direct the battle from a reinforced concrete fort at the port of Magic Valley City. The current battle seems to be a battle between the Saruyama United Army in the offshore dock and the security forces guarding it. But in fact, the two sides only fought with the heavy artillery of the turret. The troops in the reinforced concrete fort on the security army side are all officers and soldiers of the 1st Army Corps commanded by Commander Ludwig. So now it is entirely the 1st Legion that is fighting against the opponent. Report our losses quickly, Commander Ludwig ordered. An adjutant quickly reported the situation after summarizing the situation. Our army has 40 reinforced concrete forts. 80 heavy attack artillery pieces are placed inside each fort as a standard of 2. Now 14 reinforced concrete forts have been destroyed. There are still 26 left. The reinforced concrete fort is still fighting hard, the adjutant reported. Ludwig looked ugly, but he still insisted on fighting. The adjutant in charge of the report looked at the huge sea dock on the sea, and suddenly the super battery on the right front of the sea dock fired another salvo. The earth-shattering sound made him tremble all over. He didn't even dare to look at the miserable situation of the shelled location. The adjutant said to Ludwig's army commander, our side is under great pressure now. We are in danger. Therefore, the headquarters should retreat to a safe area first. Army commander, please make a decision. Captain Ludwig slowly turned his head towards him. The stern legionary commander looked at the adjutant with a disgusted expression. You mean, we have to retreat, Ludwig said with bloodshot eyes. After seeing such eyes that seemed to hate life, the adjutant was so frightened that he quickly said seriously, the headquarters is of great importance. Once it is destroyed, the 1st Army will fall into complete chaos. So please correct the situation, Commander of the Army, to make a decision. Commander Ludwig pulled his hand to the side of his waist, and a pistol was taken out. The muzzle of the gun was pointed at the adjutant's skull. Boom! A shot was fired, and the bullet pierced the adjutant's skull. A bullet hole in the center of his forehead spurted brains and blood, and his body quickly fell on his back. Some other adjutants quickly retreated. They looked at the executed adjutant with horrified expressions, and that face had an extremely terrifying expression until death. Commander Ludwig swept the group of adjutants fiercely with his eyes. On the battlefield, anyone who dares to talk about escaping will be punished on the spot. Commander Ludwig said sternly. Commander Ludwig is a war madman, extremely cruel. He is not only strict with his subordinates, but also ruthless with himself. In this dangerous battlefield, he and the command staff commanded the battle on the front line. However, fighting on the front line is indeed extremely risky, and this has nothing to do with whether you have courage or not. The super turret on the left front of the sea dock. This time the commander ordered the gunners to aim at the reinforced concrete fort where the commander of Ludwig's army was located. Heavy high-explosive artillery shells were also loaded into the barrel. Boom 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 boom. The 3 super cannons fired together. 3 heavy high-explosive shells quickly flew towards the reinforced concrete fort at the port of Magic Valley City. Commander Ludwig and his lieutenants saw the last super salvo they could see. Before they had time to fear, 3 heavy high-explosive shells hit the reinforced concrete fort. Violent vibrations and explosions turned them into charred pieces of meat. The reinforced concrete fort was also shattered, with huge pieces everywhere. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 555. ID Con 1699544. Commander Ludwig and his lieutenants were wiped out together. News of the death of Commander Ludwig quickly spread throughout the 1st Army. Even General Du Lun, who was watching the battle behind the fortification group, got the information. After receiving the news of the death of the commander of Ludwig's army, General Durand's face was very ugly. The commander of Ludwig's army is actually dead, General Du Lun said in surprise. The current battle situation is very harsh. The 1st Legion is the fighting force to carry the tripod. Once the head of the Ludwig army dies, the 1st Legion will quickly fall into a leaderless state. But now the most urgent task is to remedy, General Du Lun hastened to order his senior officers. We are now facing an unprecedented crisis situation. The headquarters of the 1st Army has been destroyed. Then quickly broadcast to the entire army. Use phone bugs to issue orders to various grassroots combat units, General Duran said urgently. The situation is very chaotic now, so I'd like to ask you, General, to give orders in person. Only in this way can we appeal to the remaining troops of our army, a senior officer said. General Duran looked at him, then nodded. The current situation can only be done like this. Okay. Tune the phone bug channel to army-wide broadcast. General Durham ordered. The senior officer turned the phone bug into a dial for the army-wide radio. My fellow soldiers, I am General Du Lun, the Commander-in-Chief of the Security Forces. Now the enemy is attacking us with their powerful firepower. But don't waver, our troops have the advantage. As long as everyone fights bravely and persists, the enemy will definitely be defeated. Now I personally go to the front line to participate in this battle with everyone. Now I order all security officers and soldiers to give priority to preserving their strength. However, attacks must be carried out between enemy attacks. After weighing it up, General Duran used a telephone bug to broadcast a combat order to the entire army. The current situation is very unfavorable, so General Du Lun allowed to preserve his strength. That also meant that the security forces retreated into the tunnel first. Including the artillerymen in the reinforced concrete forts. However, the battlefield situation is chaotic. Only a part of the grassroots troops got his information. The artillerymen in the reinforced concrete forts were furious, and most of them continued to load heavy artillery shells for the heavy attack artillery. Most of the other security forces were already scared and hid in the tunnel. The super turrets in the sea dock still give priority to bombarding the reinforced concrete turrets. After continuous bombardment, only 12 of the originally 40 reinforced concrete forts were bombed. In the rear area of the top deck of the sea dock, Mont Blanc Kulik and Usopp have taken refuge here. Even here, you can see the shocking scene of the launch of the two super turrets at the front of the offshore dock. Usopp looked towards the port of Magic Valley City and the nearby coastline, and most of the reinforced concrete fortresses of the security forces were destroyed. Dense black smoke billowed up. The shelling of the security forces is also much smaller. Because many forts were destroyed, the firepower of the security forces was also reduced. It was a terrible battle, Usopp said with emotion. Have you never seen such a terrible battle before? Chopper suddenly asked. Usopp's expression changed immediately, and his expression became very serious. This battle is indeed fierce, but Captain Usopp has seen a battle 10 times more fierce than this before, Usopp said very proudly. Really? Chopper said in shock. Usopp began to narrate those glorious experiences. Let me tell you, I once. Mont Blanc Kulik was watching the bombardment of the super turret while thinking about the most important battle of the Grandet Mansion. The battle over the Grandet Mansion is very important. If Grandet himself is arrested, the evil forces in Magic Valley City will quickly disintegrate. You must succeed. Mont Blanc Kulik prayed for Roger and Sanji. It's at the Grandet Mansion in the central area of Magic Valley City. The fierce battle is still going on, and Roger and Luffy continue to fight the remaining security forces after the huge flames raged before. Koraz, the head of the 4th Legion, personally commanded the remaining security forces to fight the two. However, it was affected by the tragic destruction of the huge flame just now. The fighting spirit of the officers and soldiers of the 4th Army was greatly reduced. They had fully experienced the horrors of combat. However, under the personal command of the head of the Koraz army, he was still able to restrain these officers and soldiers and drive them to continue to work hard. Everyone, don't back down, the head of the Koraz army ordered loudly. Kill. The officers and soldiers of the 4th Legion charged towards Rog and Luffy brandishing guns and sabers. They are really stubborn guys. If they want to die, then let them do it. Rog swung the iron birch sword and beheaded the officers and soldiers of the security forces. Kill. Luffy shook his fist and rushed towards the security forces. PFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFFF Boom 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 boom. The sounds of slashing, beating, gunshots, explosions, and shouts of killing are mixed together. The huge courtyard of the Grandette mansion, which was already in a mess, continued to be splattered with blood. At the entrance to the huge courtyard of the Grandette mansion, Eugenie, housekeeper Charles, and the attendants all looked at this tragic battle with complicated expressions. Eugenie's originally beautiful face was full of complex expressions. Fear, disgust, sorrow, and pain are all things that cannot be described from one aspect. "What is this fight for?" Eugenie said painfully. Butler Charles beside her didn't know what to say to comfort her. This battle was unimaginably tragic, and it was the first time in Eugenie's life that she had seen such a fierce battle. She couldn't understand at all what caused so many people to kill each other, what caused so many people to lose their precious lives. Inside the Grandette mansion, after Sanji and Robin scouted the situation on the third floor of the mansion, they planned to make an assault on the third floor. However, according to Robin's reconnaissance results, a lot of security forces gathered in the corridors inside the third floor. To deal with the enemies in those corridors, some explosives are needed. Sanji began to collect the explosive weapons on the knocked-down enemies in this second floor corridor. Mainly long-handled lead grenades. The power of these long-handled lead grenades is still good. If it is used, it can inflict considerable damage on the enemy. You collect these, let me help you. Robin used the flowering fruit ability to remove the long-handled lead grenade from the dead body on the ground and then transported and collected it. "Miss Robin, thank you," Sanji said lovingly. Approximately more than long-handled lead grenades were collected. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Le'Era Dream. Chapter 556. ID Con 1699545. After collecting these long-handled fuse grenades, Sanji used some rope to tie them together every 7 or 8 pieces. In this way, throwing bundles of long-handled fuse grenades can effectively kill the enemy. Sanji said as he did so. Finally, 20 bundles of long-handled lead grenades were bundled. "It's finally done," Sanji said, looking at the bundled long-handled fuse grenades. Robin looked at these bundled long-handled lead grenades and asked, how to use them. Sanji looked towards the stairs at the end of the corridor leading to the third floor above. "Of course it is to reward them. Let's start rewarding the enemies at the entrance first." Sanji picked up 2 bundles of long-handled fuse grenades and walked over to the stairs. When Sanji reached the stairs, he pulled the lead wires of the 2 bundles of long-handled lead grenades together. Sis. The 2 bundles of long-handled fuse grenades emitted sparks and white smoke. Go. Sanji kicked 2 bundles of long-handled fuse grenades to the top of the stairs with his feet. In the corridor on the third floor of the mansion, a large number of security forces guarded the place. As for the stairs that can reach the third floor from the second floor, the security forces guarded them tightly. These security forces set up 5 machine guns and aimed at the place where the stairs came up. Suddenly 2 objects flew up and then landed. Dong dong. Many security forces saw the 2 objects flying up, which were 2 bundles of long-handled fuse grenades. What was even more terrible was that their fuses had been pulled apart. "Finished," a public security officer said in horror. Boom, 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 boom. The violent explosion overwhelmed more than a dozen vigilantes guarding the stairway access location. These security forces were wiped out together with those machine guns. "We are being attacked. Don't panic. Shoot where the stairs are." The security forces behind quickly regained their composure and fired with their guns. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Bang 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 bang. Bullets from submachine guns and rifles poured forward. However, at this time it was on the second floor of the mansion. Sanji and Robin did not continue to rush forward. Sure enough, they started shooting, Sanji said. Sanji predicted that once he attacked the enemy who entered the guard on the third floor above the stairs, every enemy eliminated behind would continue to attack with firepower. So in this case, blindly rushing up is just to be a hornet's nest. And more importantly, Sanji doesn't want to take the stairs. It's just a feint to attack the stairs to contain the enemy. Sanji walked to the middle of the corridor on the second floor of the mansion, and he looked at the roof above. Sanji twisted his ankle, moved his body and prepared to shoot. Kick and shoot against etiquette. Sanji gathered amazing strength in his right leg, and then kicked towards the roof. This move is even more powerful than ordinary kicks that violate etiquette. Considering that the building of this mansion is relatively strong, Sanji used the greatest strength. Boom! With a loud bang, Sanji kicked a big hole on the top of the floor. The 4 enemies who were just in the corridor on the third floor above were also kicked away by huge force. Sanji retracted his foot, but also felt pain for a while. The structure of this mansion is really beyond imagination, Sanji said, looking at the big hole above. Now the second floor of the mansion and the third floor of the mansion have been opened up. This kind of power can only be achieved by the fists and feet of elite fighters among the giant race. But Sanji's feet are comparable to this powerful force. The security forces in the corridor on the third floor of the mansion looked in horror at the big hole in the middle of the corridor that was broken from below. What happened to the bomb? Some security forces said in surprise. But then they quickly saw 3 bundles of long-handled fuse grenades that were pulled apart and thrown from the big hole. Mom! Run away! Get down! These security forces were terrified. But the fuses of these 3 bundles of long-handled fuse grenades also burned to the end. Boom, 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 boom. A powerful explosion filled the corridor with flames and gunpowder smoke. Groups of security forces were slaughtered with blood and flesh. Among the ear-piercing explosions, those screams were also drowned out. Sanji and Robin on the second floor of the mansion can also feel the state above from the sound. Robin used the dazzling skill again in order to better observe the situation. After observing through the eyes of creation, Robin said, "Well, the enemy's casualties above are really heavy." She looked at Sanji again, and said, "I really admire you, you really think of this kind of fighting method." After hearing Robin's compliment, Sanji said with a happy face, "Miss Robin, you're over the top." Sanji continued to fight this way. He kicked several big holes from bottom to top one after another, and pulled more than 10 bundles of long-handled fuse grenades and threw them up. The explosion in the corridor on the third floor of the mansion was deafening, and the security forces were flying in flesh and blood. Coupled with the poor ventilation, it was like hell. Robin didn't give up the fight even in this situation. Dazzled. The second flower blooms. Kill with a borrowed knife. Robin crossed his arms and used the 2 skills of blossom fruit at the same time. In the third floor of the mansion, Robin created a lot of eyes to observe the situation. After being able to observe the enemy, Robin created 2 arms around the waist of the enemy. These arms pulled the fuse off the long-handled fuse grenades carried by the security forces, causing the men to self-destruct. In the corridor on the third floor of the mansion. Wow, what's going on? A security guard was shocked to see that 2 arms suddenly grew out from both sides of his waist, and these 2 arms quickly pulled the fuse of a long-handled fuse grenade he was carrying. ZZ. Sparks and white smoke came out of the Nagahama fuse grenade that was still hanging on his body. His whole body trembled with surprise and fear, but by the time he realized that it was time to quickly remove the Nagahama fuse grenade, it was already too late. Boom! This security force was left with blood and flesh everywhere. The remaining enemies that were not killed by the bundles of long-handled fuse grenades sent by Sanji were eliminated one by Robin in this way. In addition to growing arms on the vigilante and pulling the long-handled fuse grenade on the vigilante, Robin also creates arms on the enemy's body and then pulls out a pistol to kill them, or pulls out a dagger and saber to slit their throats and pierce the heart. The security forces on the third floor of the mansion were gradually killed amidst various screams, explosions and gunshots. Gudong. The last security guard on the third floor of the mansion also fell to the ground and died. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 557. ID Con 1700200. Robin used his dazzling skills to check the third floor of the mansion. Okay, the enemies on the third floor have all been eliminated, Robin said. Then let's go up, Miss Robin, Sanji said. Sanji and Robin went up the stairs to the third floor of the mansion together. The two walked in the corridor on the third floor of the mansion. This is the room. Robin led Sanji to the door of a room. Sanji looked at this room, where Mayor Grandet and his bodyguards were. The mayor of Grandet is here. All right, ready, Sanji said. Sanji focused on the door and concentrated astonishing strength on his feet. Clang. Sanji kicked up and kicked open the heavy room door. Sanji rushed inside quickly. There were 5 people inside, only 4 of them were wearing suits, and the middle one was an old man. The old man had grey hair and sharp cheeks. It was Grandet. Sanji and the others had also seen Grandet's appearance from photos before. You are Grandet, Sanji looked at the other party and said. When Grandet saw Sanji rushing in, his heart was pounding. However, the elite bodyguards around him emboldened him. Grandet looked at Sanji, and saw that the blond young man in a black suit with curly eyebrows on the right had a powerful aura. Grandet has also seen photos of Sanji and others. But Grandet was really surprised when he saw it at this time. It was young people like Sanji who beat his powerful security forces to pieces. So what? Grandet said bravely. The 4 bodyguards were all wearing suits, one was tall and thin, one was tall and tall, one was average in size but had exaggeratedly strong arms, and the other was short and stocky. Sanji glanced at the 4 of them quickly, and he faintly felt that the 4 of them had extraordinary skills. Robin also entered the room behind Sanji. She looked at Grandet and the 4 bodyguards around him. These bodyguards were Grandet's last barrier. Before Sanji could make a move, Robin decided to strike first. She felt that these enemies were difficult to deal with, especially the tall and thin man. When she used the eyes of creation to observe here just now, she was discovered by the other party and destroyed her eyes. Robin quickly folded his hands over his chest. But it was faster to find a tall and thin man, and he swung his arms quickly. A dagger flew out from each sleeve. The dagger is incredibly fast. Sanji reacted abruptly, and quickly kicked one of the daggers. Chong. The dagger was kicked away. But another dagger flew towards Robin, and this dagger pierced Robin's left chest. Puff. The dagger penetrated Robin's right lung. Robin's face stiffened. She felt these unexpected. Sanji looked at Robin in surprise. Sister Robin. Sanji growled in shock. Robin's right chest and lung was hit by a dagger, and blood flew everywhere. She fell back to the ground behind her. Sanji charged at incredible speed, grabbing Robin before she was about to fall to the ground. The dragged Robin barely opened his mouth. Cough cough. For a while, blood spurted from his mouth. Sanji looked at Robin and said, Sister Robin, cheer up. Robin's beautiful face twitched. She looked at the dagger that was pierced into the right chest and lung. She gritted her teeth and said to Sanji, Sanji, please help me pull out this dagger. I brought Chopper's special medicine. Sanji looked at the dagger, gritted his teeth, grabbed the hilt of the dagger and pulled it out. The dagger was pulled out. Sanji dropped the dagger and quickly pressed the wound. Robin's face was very pale and he had lost a lot of blood just now. She took out the special medicine given by Chopper and stuffed it into her mouth. Chopper gave the 4 people who sneaked into Magic Valley City special effects medicine. This pill reduces blood flow and relieves pain for a short time. Sanji also quickly took out the simple bandage he was carrying, and quickly helped Robin bandage it. "No, I'll do it myself," Robin said. Robin reluctantly used his flowering fruit ability. 2 arms grew out from the sides of his chest, and he wrapped himself with bandages. Sanji looked at Robin's wound, feeling like a knife was piercing his heart. The 2 daggers thrown out by the opponent just now flew towards Robin's left and right chests. Fortunately, he kicked away the dagger at Fei-Fei's left chest, otherwise a stab in the heart would be fatal. Robin was seriously injured now, and Sanji had no intention of fighting anymore. He looked at Mayor Grandet and the 4 bodyguards viciously. Especially the tall and thin bodyguard. "Remember it for me." Sanji hugged Robin and left here quickly. Sanji reached the corridor on the 3rd floor, and then rushed to the 2nd floor. In the end, I went to an empty room to help Robin with further treatment. Grandet and 4 bodyguards stood in this office. Grandet panted and looked at the door where Sanji and the others had disappeared. "It's really scary. I didn't expect them to be so young," Grandet said breathlessly. "Although I saw the sunny and handsome Sanji and the tall and mysterious Robin, it was only one side. But Grandet felt the murderous intent of the other party. "Maggot, your shot is really timely," Grandet said to the tall and thin bodyguard. Maggot, the captain of the bodyguard, looked at Grandet and said, "Well, I took action in time. According to the previous reports from the guards inside the mansion, that woman can create arms. So I must get rid of her as soon as possible." Because he was worried about the threat of Robin's powerful ability, Magath immediately took action. Magath continued, "But what surprised me was that the blond man with the curly eyebrows cared so much about the woman. It was unexpected. I thought he would continue to attack us regardless." Grandet looked around, and there was a thick thorn net outside the window. "This is a weapon created by Rog for blockade. Hard as steel, almost impossible to destroy. Air strikes are also only allowed to enter and exit small cats and dogs." Grandet said to the 4 bodyguards, "We can't stay here anymore. It's better to leave here. But now we can't go out through the window. This place is full of strange things like thorns." Magath looked at the thorn nets and said, "That's right, we can't get out. But we can hide in a higher place. This mansion has 5 floors, we'd better go up." He looked at the burly and tall man and said, "Jite, you are in charge of the rear. Guard the 3rd floor. Once you find the other party coming up, kill him." The burly and tall man said, "Yes, Captain." He said to the strong man with exaggerated arms, "Sargeras, you go to guard the 4th floor." The strong man with exaggerated arms said, "Don't worry, I will definitely make it hard for him." Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Le'er a Dream. Chapter 558. ID Con 17000201. Magath looked at the short and stocky man again, and said, "O'Rourke, you and I will personally guard the mayor of Grandet, and we will go to the 5th floor together. By the way, you can set up various traps on the 5th floor." The short, stocky man said, "Okay, let's go." In this way, Magath and the others covered Mayor Grandet to the 5th floor of the mansion. In the room where Sanji gave Robin emergency treatment on the 2nd floor of the mansion, Robin reluctantly used the arms she created to continue healing herself. Sanji took out all the medicines he was carrying. "Miss Robin, just use it," Sanji said with concern. Robin's face was still pale, but fortunately, his life was temporarily saved. She said softly, "Fortunately, I have these medicines from Chopper." Robin took several hemostatic and pain-relieving pills given by Chopper, and then drank antibiotic capsules. Ahem, ah. Robin's face was very complicated and he looked very painful. Sanji said nervously, Sister Robin. There was a smile on Robin's face. Sanji, don't be like this. I'm much better. At least I can live now. After all, the injury is not the vital part. Robin comforted him. Sanji clenched his fist and slammed it hard to the ground. They were all hit in the lungs, and they said it wasn't a serious injury, Sanji said painfully. Sanji felt extremely uncomfortable at this time, and Robin's hurt was 10,000 times more painful than his own being hurt. Robin stroked Sanji's short blonde hair with his hand. Don't worry. I'll be fine. I'm just a little tired and want some quiet rest, Robin said. Sanji looked at Robin and held Robin's slender hand. Because Robin took Chopper's special medicine, his body was even more tired. Because those special medicines need to mobilize all the functions of the body on the one hand, and the pills used to stop bleeding and relieve pain can produce a certain anesthetic effect, which slows down the blood circulation of the human body and relieves neuralgia, which makes the human body want to rest more. So it's not that Robin wants to rest, it's not that he's injured too much, it's that the medication does play that role. Sanji looked at Robin with emotion. Sister Robin, don't worry. I will take you out safely, Sanji said. Robin looked at him with deep eyes, as if looking into Sanji's heart. Sanji, go ahead and deal with Grandet and the others. I can protect myself here. And you can also see from the window that Rog and Luffy are in a hard fight and can't help us. Neither can the surrounding thorn nets release. So instead of staying here, it is better to complete the goal, Robin said meaningfully. Sanji looked at Robin, his heart twitching and crying. Robin was seriously injured but still didn't forget what he had to do. Okay, Miss Robin. You stay here. Be careful, Sanji said. Robin nodded. She looked at it with her two creative arms and said, I can't help you fight. But if something happens, I can deal with it. Sanji stood up, looked at Robin, and said, this is what I want. Sanji glanced at the door and said, I'm going. Beat those bastards to death. Robin asked again, Sanji, you must return safely. Sanji looked at Robin with determination in his eyes. Sure, Miss Robin. After Sanji finished speaking, he walked out of the room, and then he closed the door. Robin breathed softly in the room, and she was waiting for the victory of her partners at this time. Whether it was Rog and Luffy fighting in the huge courtyard of the mansion, or everyone supporting them at the Sarasama Union Marine Dockyard. And Sanji, who is continuing to complete the core goals. After Sanji left the room where Robin was resting and recuperating, he quickly started rushing to the third floor. While running, he secretly made up his mind, he must destroy all the enemies who dare to hurt Robin. Sanji rushed all the way to Grandet's office room, which he had visited once before. Near the door, there was blood left by Robin just now. Sanji glanced at everything in the room. Suddenly a meteor hammer flew over. What? Sanji jerked his upper body back. The legs alone supported this almost right-angled body. The meteor hammer passed over Sanji. Humph, you are so agile. A rich voice sounded. Sanji stood up again. He looked behind the oak desk, and saw a burly man standing there, holding the meteor hammer tightly in his hand. The meteor hammer is a huge 1 meter in diameter. It turned out that this strong man had been hiding behind the oak desk just now, and then he shot suddenly. Sanji looked at him, who was one of the previous 4 bodyguards. But Grandet and the other 3 were not there. Sanji looked at the strong man holding a meteor hammer and said, where did you, Grandet, go, and that tall, thin bastard? There was a ferocious aura on this strong man's face. You ask Captain Magath and Mayor Grandet. It's a pity that you can't see him at all because of your ability. Because I, Jet, will get rid of you here. Let me tell you, the blonde with curly eyebrows boy, I am a strong man. When I was in Bihai, I was a well-known master in the fighting world. the strong man named Jeter said fiercely. Jet slammed the meteor hammer up and threw it at Sanji again. Sanji quickly jumped out of the way. Boom! Sanji dodged, and a big crater was made on the ground, surrounded by cracks. Sanji regained his footing and said, "You are also from Bihai, and I was born in Bihai. But I have never heard of you, an unknown person like you." Jet's face changed, and he said angrily, "Asshole, you were still sucking milk when I became famous." After speaking, Jet pulled the bolus back, and then spun and threw it again. Boom! 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 The objects in this room were damaged a lot by the blast of the meteor hammer. Sanji is also constantly using jumps to avoid. Finally Sanji got to the side of a couch, kicked it up and flew towards Jet. Jeter was spinning the meteor hammer at this time. Go! The meteor hammer was thrown towards the sofa that Sanji kicked over. Boom! The sofa was shattered by the meteor hammer, and the rest of the force after the meteor hammer continued to fly in the direction of Sanji. At the last moment, Sanji dodges abruptly and jumps aside. Boom! The meteor hammer hit the wall of the room hard. A large crater was quickly smashed into the wall of the room, and the surrounding area was filled with cracks. Sanji looked at the attack effect of the opponent's meteor hammer, and was also amazed. Only if he uses all his skills can he penetrate the interior structure of this mansion. This mansion is really solidly built. Jet can throw objects with such force, which is also very powerful. However, he is still slightly inferior to Sanji.